In modern American presidential elections, the October surprise is an unexpected and game-changing revelation that has the ability or the potential to shift the election in one person's favor or another. The first instance of this was back in 1980 when Ronald Reagan, who was running against Jimmy Carter, worried that the American hostages in Iran would be released, which would give Carter a boost. In 2016, the October surprise was, or at least should have been, the release of the Access Hollywood tape, but enter James fucking Comey, who announced his investigation into Hillary Clinton's use of an email server, while making the decision not to reveal publicly that there was also an investigation into Russia's attempts to help Donald Trump. The reason October surprises tend to have an impact on election results is because they come so close to the election and they get attention, even if in retrospect, like aforementioned email server, they don't deserve to. So usually in a presidential election cycle, there's one, maybe two October surprises, but that was then, and this is now. In the last 31 days, there have been more news stories that qualify as October surprises than every other election in modern American political history combined. With one exception, and it's a really pathetic one, every single one has been about Donald, and they're all either extremely embarrassing or extremely damning, which, you know what, is how Donald likes it, right? No such thing as bad news, and with the fire hose of revelations, the corporate media just cannot seem to focus on one thing. So, as always seems to be the case with Donald, the horrors are never additive, right? They just seem to cancel each other out. So let's take some inventory, shall we?
This is what we know, that Donald Trump laid the groundwork to try to overturn the 2020 election even before he lost, knowingly pushing false claims of voter fraud and, quote unquote, resorting to crimes in his failed bid to cling to power. That's according to a newly unsealed court filing from prosecutors that lays out fresh details from the landmark criminal case against the former president.
On October 2nd, a judge revealed what we all already knew, that Donald acted as a private citizen, not as president, when he tried to overthrow our government. So here are some highlights. Donald's staff pressured election workers and threatened political violence. In a well-documented conversation, Donald admitted he'd lost, but continued to perpetuate the big lie anyway. And when aides told him that Vice President Mike Pence's life was in grave danger at the Capitol on January 6th, Donald said, so what? October 8th, Bob Woodward, veteran journalist, reveals the existence of 7 phone calls between Donald and Vladimir Putin after Donald had left office. Woodward also revealed that at the height of COVID, when COVID testing kits were scarce, Donald gave Putin not just COVID tests, but a test-making machine, which is its own special kind of betrayal of his country. Either of these should have been a deal breaker, neither, of course, was. On the same day, Donald began spreading disinformation about the Biden administration's handling of the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. Among other things, he claimed that relief money that should have gone to hurricane victims was going to immigrants. This lie and many others were deemed to be so dangerous that Republicans were coming out publicly to set the record straight. On top of that, Donald set up a GoFundMe allegedly to help those impacted by the hurricane, but it was set up by his campaign finance director, first of all, and it was never registered as a charity. On October 9th, Donald pulled out of participating in the candidate's traditional pre-election interviews on 60 Minutes, and his reason for doing so was that the producers insisted upon fact-checking him. Let that sink in. The guy who wants to be president thinks that he should be able to lie with impunity during an interview. He also probably knows that he can't get through an interview without lying compulsively.
You know, now a murderer, I believe this, it's in their genes. And we got a lot of bad genes in our country right now.
October 11th, Donald repeats the kind of eugenicist language we've been hearing from him for decades, that some people have quote unquote bad genes and that criminality is somehow genetic. This isn't rhetoric. Like this is stuff that Donald and my grandfather actually believe, which is honestly, in my view, just a way for them to excuse the fact that they're completely worthless men. All right, we are not even halfway through here as we head into October 13th. At a donor dinner for billionaires, Donald uses the R word to describe Vice President Kamala Harris. The Special Olympics has deemed the R word hate speech against people with intellectual disabilities.
You see a lot of things at Donald Trump's rallies, but his town hall last night was something else.
So play YMCA. Go ahead. Let's go. Nice and loud.
Here we go, everybody. For 39 minutes, Donald Trump, the Republican candidate for president, played DJ.
Turn that music up.
Firing up his campaign playlist at a town hall in Philadelphia, a must-win battleground state. Trump had been taking questions from a friendly crowd about the economy and immigration when he decided to end it after two people in the audience fainted.
A doctor, please.
Because of the heat.
Who the hell wants to hear questions?
On October 14th, in the middle of a so-called town hall, Donald stops answering questions. For 39 minutes, he wandered around the stage. He swayed weirdly. He looked lost. He looked disoriented. And then, without any warning whatsoever, he just took off. All of this happened while a bizarre playlist, including Ave Maria and YMCA, played on a loop. This should have raised serious questions about Donald's psychological and cognitive well-being. However, the corporate media called it a dance party.
I think the bigger problem is the enemy from within, not even the people that have come in and destroying our country. By the way, totally destroying our country. The towns, the villages, they're being inundated. But I don't think they're the problem in terms of election day. I think the bigger problem are the people from within. We have some very bad people. We have some sick people, radical left lunatics. And I think they're and it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military.
October 20th. After calling Americans the enemy from within, Donald threatens to use the military against our own citizens, the people he purportedly wants to lead. And then came the revelations that really should have just ended it all.
So he certainly falls into the general definition of fascist, for sure.
It's an explosive comment from deep within the former Trump administration, as his former chief of staff gives a first-hand look at how life then could replay at warp speed.
He's certainly the only president that has all but rejected what America is all about.
John Kelly argues Donald Trump had admiration for dictators and spoke of Adolf Hitler as someone who did, quote, some good things.
That was October 22nd. John Kelly, Donald's longest-serving chief of staff, a retired four-star general, revealed in a New York Times interview that Donald often praised Hitler, said that Hitler did some good things, and that he wanted his generals to be as loyal to him as Hitler's generals were to Hitler. Kelly said that Donald's beliefs fit the definition of fascist. A four-star Marine general is warning us that the Republican candidate for the presidency of the United States and a former occupant of the White House admires Adolf Hitler. This exclusive interview for the New York Times was buried on page A12. October 24th, a former Sports Illustrated model comes forward and makes credible allegations that Donald Trump sexually assaulted her in front of Jeffrey Epstein, a notorious rapist and sex trafficker of girls and young women. On October 25th, Jeff Bezos, owner of the Washington Post, instructs his editorial board that there will not be an endorsement from the paper for the first time in 36 years. Clearly, Jeff Bezos does this to appease Donald in the event that Donald gets back into the White House. Finally, October 27th, the Madison Square Garden Hate Fest.
I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico.
This was the same venue at which American Nazis held a pro-Hitler rally in 1939. The rhetoric Donald's speakers used was actually worse. Donald doesn't understand much, but he understands this. Flooding the zone with bullshit, as Steve Bannon would say, works. In this case, when everything is an October surprise, nothing really is, right? We know what Donald has done to America. We know what he and the thugs in his inner circle will do if they get back into power. In the last month alone, we were reminded of the former. Again, a federal judge confirmed Donald's criminal intent on January 6th as a private citizen. Donald had secret phone calls with Vladimir Putin. Donald's chief of staff confirms that Donald is an admirer of Adolf Hitler, and there was yet another sexual assault allegation against the Republican candidate. And again, we learn more about what they are already threatening to do, such as revoke the broadcasting license of any outlet that reports negatively on them, to use military force against Americans, and just an increasingly violent and a fascistic approach to American governance. Any one of these things should have dominated the news cycle for weeks. Instead, every single one of them has been allowed to drop out of view. Then, of course, there are the countless other things we weren't reminded about this month. The fact that Donald is an adjudicated rapist, a business fraud with 6 bankruptcies in his past, who still owes New York State over $500 million, a convicted felon who's still awaiting sentencing, a man who is currently out on bail in 3 different jurisdictions, and a traitor who stole highly sensitive documents from the American people. The old rules about October surprises don't apply anymore, just as no rules ever seem to apply to Donald. He's betrayed this country by word and deed more times than I can count, and yet here we are. Maybe that will end up being the real October surprise, that the corporate media and just enough Americans don't care enough to stop him. But that's where we come in. Let's get this thing done, okay?